We spent the next hour sitting on the floor of the apartment, backs pressed against the hallway wall, watching the front door like it might breathe on its own. The key was still in the lock, sticking out like a threat or a promise. Ian didn't let go of my hand, and not once, but he also didn't look at me, not really. His eyes stayed fixed on the door, distant and haunted, like he was replaying every moment of the night in a loop he couldn't escape from. At some point, I whispered, "Do you think he's still out there?" Ian swallowed. "I don't know," he said softly, then after a long pause, "I don't know anything anymore." His voice cracked on the last word. I wanted to pull him closer, tell him it wasn't his fault, tell him whatever happened last night didn't make him the villain, but the air between us felt fragile, a glass surface that would shatter if I touched it the wrong way. So instead, I said nothing. I let the silence stretch, let it speak for both of us. Eventually, Ian stood up slowly, like his body hurt in places he didn't want to admit. "I need to clean up," he murmured. Before he walked away, he hesitated. Just for a second, his eyes flicking toward mine like he wanted to say something else, something important, something he couldn't trust himself to voice. He didn't. He disappeared into the bathroom, closing the door gently behind him. I stayed in the hallway, staring at the key in the door, wondering who left it, wondering why they walked away, wondering if walking away was part of something bigger. A warning or a game or something darker. My thoughts spiraled until I realized something strange. The key wasn't silver. It was brass, old, scratched at the edges, and not the kind of key this building used. Someone had brought their own. My chest tightened when Ian finally returned. His face was washed, his hair damp again, but his eyes were still exhausted. He sat on the couch across the room instead of beside me this time, creating space, distance. "Are you mad at me?" I asked quietly. He looked up, startled. "No," he said quickly. Too quickly. I'm mad at myself. And scared." And his voice trailed off. "And what?" I pushed gently. He clenched his jaw. "Scared of what this is doing to you." There it was, the unspoken truth between us, that whatever feelings we had, whatever tension had been building for months, was now tangled with fear, danger, and secrets too heavy to hold. I moved closer, not touching him, just close enough that he couldn't pretend I wasn't there. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. His breath caught, barely, but enough that I heard it. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't decode, relief, guilt, something deeper. Before either of us could say anything else, his phone buzzed. He froze, stiffened, turned pale. "Who is it?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just handed me the phone with a shaking hand. There was a new message on the screen. No name, no number saved, just the same unknown contact from before. The message said, "You forgot something last night. I'll come back for it." My stomach dropped. "What does he mean?" I whispered. Ian stared at the floor, voice barely audible. "He means he's not done. Not with me and not with us." A cold silence filled the room. Then, as if to punctuate the moment, the front door creaked, not fully, just enough to move, just enough to remind us the key was still there and someone could return at any moment. If you want, I can continue with part 2, a new introduction plus rising action, or expand this into a full multi-part series with new twists, deeper emotions, and even darker suspense. The morning had that soft, washed-out glow, the kind that makes everything look calmer than it actually feels. I stood by the living room window, watching a thin line of sunlight stretch across the quiet street. The house was still, almost too still. Even the ticking of the wall clock felt louder today, tapping against the silence like a reminder of something I couldn't quite name. I breathed in slowly, pretending the calmness outside could settle the nervous heaviness in my chest. Lately, I'd been waking up with this feeling, an uneasy mix of anticipation and dread, though nothing in my routine had changed. I still made the same morning tea, still opened the blinds the same way, still walked through the same narrow hallway lined with old family pictures, but something in the air had shifted. Or maybe it was me. I tried to ignore the thought and headed toward the kitchen, only to pause halfway when I heard the door creak open. Not loudly, just enough to make my heart stutter. Footsteps. Slow. Familiar. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Morning," he said, voice low, sleep rough, carrying a warmth that always arrived before he did. I finally looked over my shoulder. There he was, standing in the doorway, hair a mess, shirt clinging loosely to his frame, one hand pushing back the strands that kept falling over his eyes. His presence always shifted the atmosphere around him, like he carried a quiet storm wherever he went. He smiled at me, small, tired, but sincere, and that smile did something to me every time. I tried to hide the way my chest tightened. "Morning," I replied, forcing a casual tone. He stepped into the kitchen, brushing past me. Too close. My body tensed before I could stop myself, and I silently cursed the way even the smallest things affected me now. He grabbed a glass, filled it with water, and leaned against the counter, watching me over the rim as he drank. There was a hint of something in his eyes, something unreadable, something I had noticed for weeks but never dared question. I turned away, pretending to check the kettle, but my thoughts were louder than any sound in the room. Why does it feel like he's hiding something? Why? Does his silence feel heavier every day? Why do I feel watched lately? A faint noise echoed from the back of the house, a soft thud, like something falling. We both froze. He set his glass down a little too fast. What was that? I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing toward the hallway. It's nothing, he finally said. But his voice didn't match his words. A chill crawled up my spine. That same uneasy feeling, the one tugging at me for days, suddenly sharpened, like a shadow stepping into focus. Something was off in this house, and I had a feeling today would be the day I finally understood why. If you want, I can continue with the rising action, 1,200 to 1,500 words, next. The moment Ian whispered, "He has a key," something inside me snapped into place, a mix of fear, instinct, and something dangerously protective. We backed away from the door in slow, silent steps. Or maybe we didn't. Maybe it just felt slow because every second stretched into something unbearable. The doorknob rattled quietly, like the man outside wasn't trying to break in, he was trying to savor the moment. Ian grabbed my wrist, his grip so tight it almost hurt, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. His hand was cold and trembling, and the unspoken plea in that touch was louder than anything he'd said. The lock clicked again, louder this time. "Why does he have a key?" I whispered, my voice barely air. Ian didn't answer. His jaw flexed, his lips parted like he wanted to explain, but no words came out. Another sound. A soft metallic scrape, the key sliding deeper into the lock. Ian pressed his back against the wall, pulling me slightly behind him. The gesture was protective, instinctual, but it didn't make sense. He was the one in danger, yet here he was, shielding me. "Ian," I whispered, "we need to call someone." He shook his head violently. "No police," he mouthed. "Not for this. Not for this." The words echoed like a warning. Whatever he had gotten involved in, whatever happened last night, went far beyond a messy breakup or a jealous ex. The lock turned halfway. Ian's breath hitched, a tiny, fragile sound that seemed to tear him open. Then he whispered something I never expected. "Oh, if something happens, don't protect me. Just run." I stared at him, stunned. Run, leave him. I didn't move, and in that unmoving moment, something shifted between us, something taboo, something terrifying, something honest. Ian realized I wasn't going to agree. He looked at me with a mix of frustration and something warmer, something that shouldn't have been surfacing now. "Of all times, you're not listening," he whispered. "And neither are you," I whispered back. The lock turned another fraction, almost there. The sound was so small, so delicate, yet it felt like a blade pressed against my spine. Ian's chest rose and fell too quickly. His fingers shook where they still held onto me. Then, slowly, he let go of my wrist, but only so he could turn toward me completely. "Ian, what are you?" He cut me off with a look, raw, conflicted, filled with secrets he was afraid to share. "Just stay close," he whispered. His hand hovered near mine, not touching, but close enough that I felt the warmth of his skin. We were standing so close our breaths touched, not intimate by intention, intimate by fear. Another click, louder, clearer. Ian closed his eyes for a second, inhaling through his nose like he was preparing for impact. "I didn't mean for you to get involved," he murmured. "But I am," I said softly, "whether you want me to be or not." His eyes opened, wet, tired, but focused on me like I was the only thing grounding him. And then, just as the key turned completely and the lock gave a final, sharp click, everything stopped. The door didn't open, not yet. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, unnatural. Ian and I stood frozen, listening. No footsteps. No whisper. No breathing outside. Just nothing, the kind of nothing that feels wrong. Ian exhaled shakily. "We need to hide," he whispered. "Now." But I didn't move, not because I wasn't scared, but because my eyes were locked on his on the bruise near his temple, on the tear at the edge of his shirt, on the fear in his expression, fear so raw it made something inside me ache. Ian, I whispered, what did he do to you? He blinked, long and slow. Something inside him softened, or broke, or both. He made me think I owed him something, he said. And when I wouldn't give it, he didn't take it well. My throat tightened, a taboo kind of anger burned under my skin, dark, protective, unfamiliar. The silence outside stretched longer, too long. Ian reached for my hand again, and this time, he didn't hesitate, his fingers laced with mine, shaking, desperate, scared, but sure. The front door remained closed, still silent, but the key was still in the lock, left there, taunting us. Ian stared at it, then at me. This isn't over, he whispered. His voice wasn't scared this time. It was resigned, or maybe it was warning me. And as we stood there in the dim living room, hands intertwined, breathing in the heavy, electric air between us, I felt it too. This wasn't the end of the night, or the danger, or the truth sitting between us. It was only the beginning. If you'd like, I can continue with the conclusion. Cliffhanger, 400 to 600 words, to close this episode with a dramatic, unresolved twist. I still remember the way the air felt that evening, heavy, almost swollen, as if it were holding a secret it didn't want to release. Our family house in the village always had a strange quietness to it after sunset, but that night, the silence felt different, tighter. The kind of silence that makes you listen twice. I had come to stay for a week, something I hadn't done in years. Life had pulled me away, and honestly, so had memories I never found the courage to face again. But when my aunt called, insisting the family needed help preparing for the annual gathering, I couldn't refuse. A part of me wondered if she sensed it, the tension I tried so hard to hide. The thing I never spoke about. The thing we never spoke about. My cousin, Zion, was already there when I arrived. He stood in the courtyard, unpacking crates of decorations as if nothing had changed. As if years hadn't passed. As if the distance between us hadn't been built deliberately, brick by uncomfortable brick. He looked up the moment my car stopped. His eyes locked on mine longer than they should have. A faint smile, too faint, almost cautious, appeared on his face. Long time, he said, wiping his hands on his shirt. Yeah, I answered, even though a dozen other words crowded my tongue. We hugged, but even that felt loaded, like there was a third presence between us, our shared memory, our unspoken history pressing its weight on our shoulders. Inside the house, everything felt unchanged. The wooden cupboards, the faint smell of sandalwood from my aunt's incense, the old clock ticking too loudly in the hallway. These tiny details wrapped around me like vines, pulling me back to a time I had tried so hard to forget. But the real uneasiness crept in when my aunt casually mentioned something that made my chest tighten. Oh, by the way, she said while stirring tea, Zion's been different lately. Quiet. Distracted. Keeps to himself. Her words shouldn't have meant anything. And yet, they did. Later that night, after everyone went to bed, I stepped outside to get some air. The moon hung low, casting pale light across the courtyard. And that's when I heard it, footsteps. Slow, hesitant, almost as if the person wasn't sure whether they should continue. I turned. Zion stood there, half in the shadow of the doorway. You can't sleep either, he asked. I nodded, though the truth was I hadn't even tried. Something had been tugging at me the moment I stepped foot in the house. A strange pull, familiar, dangerous, and completely unwanted. He walked closer, the air tightening with each step. You know, he said quietly, I thought you'd never come back here. There was something in his tone, something buried but alive. Something we had both agreed, without words, to bury years ago. But if it was truly buried, why did it feel like it was rising again, and why? Deep down, was I afraid that I already knew the answer? If you want, I can continue with high voltage sign rising action, 1,200 to 1,500 words, next. He moved like he was trying not to be seen, even by me, his shoulders stiff, steps shaky, eyes avoiding every source of light. I closed the door quietly behind him, unsure whether I should ask something or let the silence breathe. The air felt thick, like the apartment itself was listening. He dropped his bag onto the couch with a soft thud. I noticed the faintest smear of dirt on his forearm. Or maybe it was blood. I wasn't sure, and I wasn't sure I wanted to be. Ian, what happened? I finally asked, my voice quieter than I expected. He didn't look at me. Not at first. He inhaled slowly, like he was gathering pieces of himself before speaking. I need a minute. Please. His tone wasn't angry, but it carried a weight that made me step back. I nodded, even though he wasn't looking. He walked toward the bathroom, the door clicking shut behind him. The sound echoed, too sharp, too final. I stood in the hallway, staring at the door like it held answers. My mind began stitching together possibilities, none of them comforting. Something was wrong with him. Something beyond a bad day at work. His clothes were slightly torn at the sleeves, his lip looked faintly bruised, and his voice trembled like he was fighting something inside his chest. I moved to the living room, trying to calm the tension twisting in my stomach. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, though no rain had fallen yet. The sky was heavy, swollen with dark clouds pressing against the windows. A humid breeze seeped in through the small gap Ian always forgot to close. I looked around the apartment. Everything was exactly where we left it, a quiet, lived-in space. Our mismatched couch cushions, the stack of takeout menus, the small plant Ian insisted on saving even though it was determined to die. Nothing had changed, yet something felt broken, like an invisible line between us had snapped. After a few long minutes, I heard the tap run in the bathroom, then silence, then a small, shaky breath. I found myself stepping closer to the door, not touching it, just standing near enough to hear him breathing. Why did it sound like he was trying not to cry? My throat tightened. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew this wasn't ordinary. When the bathroom door finally clicked open, Ian stepped out in a clean t-shirt, his hair damp, his expression unreadable. He looked calmer but exhausted, like he'd been holding something inside for far too long. He walked past me again, slow and unsure. Ian, talk to me, I said quietly. He stopped. His shoulders rose and fell with a deep exhale. Then he turned. His eyes looked different, like there was a story behind them he was terrified to tell. Something raw. Something heavier. I was with someone, he said. I blinked. That wasn't the explanation I expected, but before I could ask anything, he continued. It went wrong. A lot wrong. My heartbeat quickened. What do you mean? He swallowed, looking away. I shouldn't have been there with him. I shouldn't have trusted. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Him, who was he talking about? Jealousy, sharp and unwelcome, stabbed my chest, not because Ian owed me anything, but because he said it like the situation was dangerous, like someone had hurt him. You're scaring me, I whispered. Ian met my eyes. Good. Because I'm scared too. The storm outside cracked with distant lightning, flashing white across his face. In that split second, I saw it clearly, the bruise near his temple, half hidden under his hair. What happened? My voice was barely there, but instead of answering, Ian walked toward his bedroom. A part of me wanted to stop him, another part knew he wasn't ready. He shut the door softly this time, not a slam, more like a plea for space, but I couldn't leave it at that. I paced the living room, trying to make sense of everything. The details felt scattered, but my intuition pieced them together. The bruises, the torn clothes, the late night, the trembling voice. I was with someone. It went wrong. What did wrong even mean in his world? Ian wasn't reckless. He wasn't the type to get into trouble unless someone dragged him into it. My thoughts spiraled until I found myself at his door. My hand hovered over it, trembling slightly. I didn't want to push him. But I also couldn't pretend I wasn't worried. Ian, I said softly, keeping my voice steady. No response. I tried again, gentler. I don't need details. I just want to know you're okay. Silence. Then a slow, shaky breath from the other side. I didn't know why that sound hit me so deeply. Maybe it was because I'd never heard him breathe like that before. Maybe it was because something about tonight blurred the line between concern and something more dangerous, something I didn't want to admit. Finally, the door opened an inch. Ian stood there, leaning against the frame, eyes red but no tears falling. I don't know if I'm okay, he whispered. A chill climbed up my spine. His vulnerability pulled me in, but there was something else too, something dark, something unsettled, something he was still hiding. I felt it in the air between us. Tell me what you need, I said. Ian looked down at the floor, then back up at me with an expression I couldn't read. His voice dropped to a near whisper. I need you to trust me and not ask questions tonight. Can you do that? Could I ignore the bruises, the tension in his voice, the fact that he came home shaken, almost scared, but standing there, witnessing how fragile he looked, how unlike himself. I found myself nodding before I could think. "I trust you," I said. He closed his eyes briefly, like those words meant more than I realized. "Good," he whispered. "Because if you knew where I was tonight, you wouldn't." My stomach twisted. Something taboo flickered behind his tone, not about a person but about the situation itself. Something he shouldn't have been part of. Something dangerous. What does that mean? I asked, unable to stop myself. Ian didn't respond. Instead, he walked past me again, heading toward the kitchen. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was forcing himself to stay grounded. He poured water into a glass, hand trembling slightly. I watched silently. After a moment, he said, "Someone might come by tomorrow. If they do, don't open the door." My pulse spiked. "Why?" "Who? Just don't," he cut in sharply. The tension in the room thickened. "Ian," I said, my voice firmer now, "you're starting to scare the hell out of me." He leaned against the counter, staring into his glass like the answers were hiding at the bottom. "I know," he murmured. "And I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to get dragged into this." Dragged into what? Before I could ask again, Ian's phone buzzed. He froze. I watched the color drain from his face. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He just stared at the screen, eyes widening slightly. "Who is it?" I whispered. Ian slowly turned the screen face down on the counter. "No one." He lied. "It wasn't a good lie. It wasn't even close." Then he said the words that made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. "Promise me you won't go anywhere alone tomorrow." My jaw tightened. "Ian, what did you get yourself into?" He looked up at me finally, and in his eyes, I saw it clearly: fear, regret, guilt, and something else, something he wouldn't dare say out loud. All he whispered was, "Something I can't undo." The storm outside cracked again, thunder shaking the windows, and somewhere in the apartment, or maybe only in my imagination, I heard a faint sound, a soft tap, like someone testing the strength of our front door. If you want, I can now continue with the climactic moment, 800 to 1,200 words, in the same intense, suspenseful style. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same image: Mr. Hale's hand resting on the doorframe, the quiet curve of that unreadable half-smile, the way his voice dipped when he said, "You want a reason to stay." By morning, the apartment felt smaller. Not just physically, emotionally, like the walls had absorbed the tension he left behind and now breathed it back at me. The key still sat on the table, untouched, unmoving, yet somehow louder than anything else in the room. I avoided it like it was alive. By noon, I found myself pacing from the couch to the window, staring down into the courtyard where his office windows faced mine. The curtains were drawn. His car wasn't in its usual spot. Was he avoiding me, or giving me space, or watching to see what I would do? Every possibility made my stomach twist in a different way. Around 3 in the afternoon, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Purposeful. Stopping right outside my door. My breath snagged. A soft knock, not his. I knew the rhythm of his knock. He measured, confident, the kind that announced itself. This one was hesitant, like someone testing the idea of knocking at all. I opened the door. Maria, the old woman from the floor below, peered up at me with concerned eyes. Her grocery bag trembled slightly in her grip. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I don't want to pry, but I saw Mr. Hale leaving your apartment last night. Late." My heart thudded painfully. She leaned closer. "You be careful with that man." I swallowed. "Why?" Her gaze flicked nervously down the empty hallway. "He's not unkind," she said, "but he's intense. People get involved with him, and then they disappear. Or move out suddenly. Or start acting different. Just guard your heart, okay?" I nodded, barely breathing, and she shuffled away. Her words echoed long after the elevator doors closed, to disappear suddenly. Act different. Why did they sound less like warnings, and more like predictions? I closed the door slowly, the latch clicking like a gavel on a verdict I wasn't ready to hear. Hours passed. The key glinted. My mind spiraled. At dusk, my phone buzzed. A message from him. "Hale, I'll be at the office late. If you need me, you know where to find me." My blood ran hot and cold at the same time. Need him? Was that what this was now? Another message followed, this one slower to appear, as though he hovered over the screen before sending it. "Hale, don't make your decision in the dark. Come talk to me before midnight." Before midnight. Why that specific deadline? Why did it sound less like an invitation, and more like an ultimatum twisted into concern. My hand shook as I read it again. The apartment suddenly felt suffocating, a box filled with questions and too little oxygen. I grabbed my jacket, hesitated, then, without letting myself think, snatched the key from the table. The metal was warm, almost as if someone had held it recently. My heartbeat stumbled. Had he been here, watching, checking if I would pick it up, or was I imagining the warmth because I needed an excuse to walk toward him? The hallway felt longer than usual as I stepped out, each footstep heavier than the last. The building hummed with its normal nighttime sounds, pipes groaning, neighbors arguing faintly through thin walls, but everything felt different. Charged. When I reached the courtyard, a light flicked on in his office window. He was there, waiting, not patiently, not impatiently, just waiting. As if he'd been counting the seconds until I appeared. My fingers closed tighter around the key, and then a question, quiet, poisonous, impossible to ignore, slid into my mind. Am I walking toward a choice, or a trap I secretly wanted all along? I took a step, then another. His silhouette shifted in the window, turning toward me, and for a split second, I swear, he smiled. The office door was just ahead. My heart was already inside, but my mind whispered the one question I wasn't ready to answer. Was I about to find the truth, or lose myself in it? If you want, I can assemble the full 4,000-word script, create visual prompts for every section, or generate a thumbnail prompt that matches this exact story.